Good morning, beautiful people of God. Look at you all there on the long weekend. Oh, I'm impressed. I'm Kim McMillan, and I'll be leading the service this morning. I think Jenny's back next week, right? Yes. Right. So, yeah, so you can look forward to that. I will make you look forward to that. We are privileged to meet and gather and do our work on the traditional territories of the Secwepemc people, and for that we are grateful. Announcements. There are at least a couple. I'm going to ask everybody to come forward at once. And
me first? I'm waiting for my friend Gary. Are you going first? Sure. Unless you want to go first. Okay, you go first. And you're ahead of Gary.
Morning, me again. Hi. So I just wanted to mention, in case people didn't think on it, tomorrow's a stat holiday. So there is no Rotary tomorrow, Rotary lunch. So all those that love to come and help us on Monday, we don't have any Rotary going on this week. But we do have community lunch on Wednesday that I hope will come together. So as usual, if anybody's able to help with cooking on Tuesday, we'll try to get that arranged, and helping on Wednesday. Jenny and I aren't here this week till Thursday, so we'll try to get it arranged. Thanks.
Thanks, Debbie. Greetings. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jane Harding. This is Gary Lepke. We're both sitting on your elected board of directors, leadership team. That's what we call each other. And today we have a really exciting announcement to make to you. We created over the summer a team that would think and pray and dwell on what this congregation and this community needs. And we had passed, you heard earlier in the summer, that we were going to be looking for a person to be our executive manager. Because we've grown to capacity in terms of the work that we're doing, and it's either grow or die, right? So today we're here to tell you we had some process, right? Yep. Where we created a job description, and then we took the job description and we created some really awesome questions around that we would use for interview. We posted the position for 2 weeks. We posted it on Facebook. We posted it on our own newsletter. We posted it word of mouth. Thank you for those who said like and post, which was really great. That's probably the best way to get stuff out there. It was also in the regional newsletter. On Facebook, we got about, because I did one of those things where you pay to boost the post, so we got about 2,000 hits, and that means people that actually opened it up and looked at it. So I thought that was really good. We ended up with 2 applicants. One was screened out, so we did interview one applicant. And this applicant is successful. We've offered her the position. She's verbally accepted. And so we hope that you will join us in welcoming Mary Scheidegger to our team. Some of you will know her. Some of you will not know her yet, but you will soon. And we're going to have a bit of a shindig, because I can't do anything without a party. So we'll be doing something fun where you can all get a chance to meet her and chat with her. And she's starting September 11th. I just wanted to thank all of the folks, the board and the special team that came together for this kind of work, and M&P. And this is an amazing place to do our work and to be leaders in this wonderful place. And so thank you to you, Gary, so much. Do you want to say anything?
I was just going to say that Jane clutches onto that iPhone like I'd hold on to a $100 bill. She never looked at it, I noticed. I didn't know the candidate at all, but we developed a series of questions, as Jane mentioned, and they were questions that were around competency, obviously, alignment with the vision of First Community, and at the end of the interview, I felt very confident, as did the other members of the board, that this was a candidate that would do the job that we expect. And so I think it's a pretty exciting time, and I look forward to it. And thanks for being part of the interview team. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, gang, it's going to start. It's exciting.
When I hear Jane say, we had some process, I thought, how United Church. What we do is maybe all over the place, but we have process. As we gather, we will light the Christ candle as a way of remembering and keeping in front of us the presence of Christ with us always. Please join me in the call to worship. There is something beyond words that is holy and lies at the center of everything. We gather to learn. We gather to love and be loved. So that we might be called forth to love the holy in every other human and every other thing. Let us pray. Holy One, we gather as we have done for countless years, decades, centuries, even millennia. Once again, we seek fellowship, knowledge, support, accountability, and love from one another. And sometimes we gather just to hear the great stories again, to remember who we are, and to be nourished by that remembering. May we allow ourselves to let go, to fall into the net of your eternal love, even as we lift up our hearts and voices to you and to one another. Amen. And on this path, let's sing. I was commenting to, I think, Virginia and Paul just before the service that this time, the theme exploration, years ago was the children's story, and then it was the theme conversation, still aimed at, mainly at kids and so on. And then, of course, as time went by and there were fewer and fewer kids, I think it was Jenny who started calling it the theme, theme exploration. And so this pattern developed, which means that the poor guest preacher has to write basically 2 sermons, you know, a mini sermon. That's what I was after. Well, now I'm going to change the mood considerably. We have had some dark times in the last 2 or 3 weeks. As BC and much of Canada has been ravaged by forest fires of unrivaled size and intensity and aggression. And I'm wondering how many of you have been on evacuation alert? Anybody? Okay, yeah, Daryl down, that would be down south at the cottage, and somebody over here. Nobody's actually had to evacuate yet, right? Okay, nor have we. Those of us in town were not directly threatened, but the ferocity of those fires really left you wondering. And it's happened before here in 1998. We missed it because we were out of town, but we were evacuated. Anyway, but like probably many of you, Susan and I did some preparations just in case. We got a big box and put a bunch of our important papers in there and things we didn't want to lose or things that would facilitate an insurance claim should it come to that. And we began to think about an evacuation plan. Vehicles, would we take the trailer? You know, all of those kinds of things. It wasn't paranoia, I don't believe, it was simple prudence. But as we watched the news and social media, we couldn't but be moved by the plight of so many, including some of our friends who did need to leave their homes, not knowing if their homes would be there when they got back. It was especially moving to hear of firefighters who lost their own homes and just continued on fighting to save their neighbors' homes. And it got me wondering about what inner resources I would be able to mobilize if I were the one to possibly be losing everything. And I know that different personalities experience those times differently. There are some people who just seem to take it in stride and just confidently move on. No matter what happens, they know they'll manage, they'll cope, and they just carry on. And then there are others who worry, others who experience anxiety. There are people who feel very attached to their home, to their actual physical presence, and their things that are in there. And some people will go into deep grief over the loss of those precious objects and the complete disruption of their lives. I think it was 20 years ago this year when they had the big forest fires in Barrier, Clearwater. Was it Barrier? Yes, it was Barrier. Thank you. And Kelowna, both pretty much around the same time, the Okanagan Mountain Fire. You remember the one that destroyed the Myra Canyon trestles and so on. Anyway, I had just started my job as conference minister at that time, and I had the task of hosting our brand new moderator, Peter Short, to the scenes of those two major fires. And Kelowna, we surveyed the damage and we talked to some of the people involved, met with groups of people. One man who lost his home in Kelowna said, I think it was a friend who was just trying to kind of make him feel better about it, and the friend said, "It's just stuff." And he said, "No, it's not just stuff, it's home." And that stuck with me. Even if it is just stuff, sometimes we just need people to be with us as we grieve what has been lost. But it's one thing to experience grief. I mean, we all experience grief. We all lose people. We all know something about loss, and we know something about how to deal with that, as difficult as it may be. In some ways, I think it's harder to deal with things like anxiety and worry and fear and dread. Those kinds of feelings are a little bit harder to just control. Now, there are therapists and counselors who can help with these things, but I'd like to focus on the spiritual resources that we might also bring to a situation like that. And I always think about, well, what's the worst that can happen? And so I'm drawn to thinking about some of the people that you've heard about, and we've heard about it, who went through the most horrendous suffering and somehow managed to keep some sense of joy and genuine life about them. I'm thinking of people like Eddie Hillison, a Jewish teenager who died in the concentration camps. And she left writings that were absolutely inspiring. Her ability to remain positive and even grateful for the small things, the smallest things of life, was absolutely amazing. What did she have that most of us don't have? It seems to me that people who cope well with the loss of their homes are those who are somehow able to carry their sense of home inside them. That it's not just tied to a particular place or a particular house or even particular possessions, but there's something that they carry around inside them that goes wherever they go. And maybe the more we're aware of and able to be in touch with that miracle within, the easier it may be to cope with such massive changes outside of us. Traditional word for that is faith. If we have faith in the divine within, we are less dependent on the externals to anchor us. Doesn't mean that we won't love our home and cherish it, or that we shouldn't. But we won't be left entirely rootless if we lose it. Some of the greatest spiritual growth, I'm sure many of you can attest to this, happens after a significant loss. Some time after, often. But at least it can happen if the loss is acknowledged and accepted, and the person is able to look forward to a new future. Think Rick Hansen, this fabulous athlete who is in an accident, spinal cord is damaged, he's paraplegic, in a wheelchair the rest of his life. I don't know how long he spent in the pits grieving that loss, but he soon took on a much more ambitious goal, and man, look what he accomplished. I have not lost my home. I have not experienced another major loss like that in my life, so I offer thoughts with humility. I have not been tested. God willing, I won't be, but it seems good to be prepared. Let's sing, Healer of Our Every Ill, Hope for Our Tomorrow.
Good morning. My name is Paul Cox. Today's scripture reading is a selection of verses from Romans chapters 5 and 8 and the Gospel according to St. Mark chapter 8. Hope does not disappoint us because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that has been given to us. But you are not in the flesh, you are in the Spirit, since the Spirit of God dwells in you. If Christ is in you, though the body is dead because of sin, the Spirit is life because of righteousness. If the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies also through his Spirit that dwells in you. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received a spirit of adoption. When we cry, Abba, Father, it is that very Spirit bearing witness with our spirit that we are children of God. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and the sake of the good news will save it. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church.
I hadn't seen the picture. For the benefit of those joining our community radio, through our community radio station or on YouTube, the title of this reflection is, Will the Real Self Please Stand Up? And it's based on the selection of readings we just heard from Romans 5 and 8 and Mark 8. Many of you will remember, because we're all pretty much almost old enough, the title or the TV program To Tell the Truth. Do you remember that one? Each episode had a celebrity panel and 3 contestants, one of whom was the central character, let's say John Smith, for example, and the other 2 were imposters. They were all pretending to be John Smith. The panel's job was to detect which of the contestants was the real one by posing questions to the different contestants and listening to the answers. Then, after the time was up, the panelists would record their guess as to who was the real person, and then the host would say, Would the real John Smith please stand up? It was lots of fun, actually, to watch that. I mean, it's basically a party game turned into a TV show. So, segue now into something completely different. Have you ever wondered what people might say at your funeral? Have you ever thought about that? You may not admit it, but I would guess that most of us might have, you know. You go to a funeral and you hear what they're saying about the dear departed, and you wonder, gee, what would they say about me, I wonder. Have you ever wondered what your legacy might be in the world after you're gone? What difference your presence would have made? What will be of lasting value? Some of us might hope for big things, some for very modest things. Some of us hope we'll be remembered, but for some that's maybe not all that important. Some might even hope to be forgotten. I suspect that most of us, at the very least, hope that our lives will have made some kind of a positive difference to someone or someone's, even if they're not aware of it. I think, for example, of my great-grandparents who were dead long before I was born. I never met. I couldn't even tell you. If I thought about it, I might come up with a name or two, but I'm not even sure what their names were. I have no doubt that their lives have impacted mine in ways that I'm unaware. Now, when I was much younger, I participated in numerous kind of personal growth events and experiences in which I was asked to think about these questions. I think in one case I even wrote my own obituary or something. You know, this is at age 25 or 30. And I don't remember what my answers might have been back then. But as I've gotten older, closer to the end of my life, and as I find myself attending more funerals of people who are closer to my own age, my mind a little more often pauses to think about these things. But today's reflection is not really about that either. It's not really about what our legacy will be. It's about who we are right now. If the real me stood up right now, would I recognize him? Like the picture. Would you? How do we even put into words who we are? What is it that makes you, you, and me? Is it our personalities, our character traits? Is it the values we hold, the actions we take, the extent to which we live out those values? What is it that makes us, us? And then, of course, the question, going back to the eulogy, is how will people speak about the qualities that I'm less proud of? You know, the things I hoped maybe they wouldn't notice or wouldn't remember. You know, he was a good man, but how does the way I see myself compare with how others see me? I think most of us see ourselves as a mix of good and bad qualities, but mostly good, yeah? We see ourselves as loving or weak or smart or not, as organized or go-with-the-flow people, perhaps as self-centered sometimes or thoughtless or thoughtful. A person, and I've seen this many times, a person can at one moment kind of feel like they're better than others in some way. It's like what is it, 90% of drivers rate themselves as better than average. And then, so you might feel like you're a little better than others in some way, and then moments later or a day later, you feel like somehow you're not as good as other people. That's pretty normal. And often I think the latter, the feelings of not being as good, are actually covered up by our feeling better than others. Thus, how the bully has to pick on somebody and point out all their flaws in order to boost their own self-confidence. So then, how does this "who am I" question figure into our spiritual life? Can we ever really know ourselves, or anyone else for that matter? Is who we are in our own minds also who we are in God? I think most of us were taught that to grow closer to God, closer to the divine, we need to enhance our good qualities and try to minimize or eliminate the negative ones. If we can't manage that, then we need to at least kind of hide those negative ones. We try to live a good life, behave morally and responsibly, be honest and caring and all those things. We earn our salvation by striving to be as good as we can be and by controlling or stuffing down our less positive impulses, which we all have. But there is a school of thought that says these qualities that we think we are not really who we are. Perhaps we've been striving in the wrong direction. What if our true nature is something else again? And to that end, I'd like to read an excerpt from a book by the great mystical teacher Thomas Merton, who lived his adult life in the first half of the 20th century. And in this book, he describes a life-changing experience of his own. In Louisville, at the center of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all those people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another, even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness. The whole illusion of a separate, holy existence is a dream. Then it was as if I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depths of their hearts, where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach, the core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes. If only they could all see themselves as they really are. If only we could see each other that way all the time, there would be no more war, no more hatred, no more cruelty, no more greed. But this cannot be seen, only believed and understood by a peculiar gift. And incidentally, this experience of Merton's is not unique. I've read and heard numerous people speak of moments like this. Our own former moderator, Bill Phipps, whom some of you know, and has preached, at least virtually, from this pulpit, has described a very similar experience in New York City, emerging from a subway station. And George MacLeod, who restored and ran the ancient abbey on Iona and recreated that community. He experienced something very much like it during the Great War, seeing Christ in the faces of wounded soldiers on a train being evacuated. So Merton continues, at the center of our being is a point of nothingness, which is untouched by sin and by illusion, a point of pure truth, a point or spark which belongs entirely to God, which is never at our disposal, from which God disposes of our lives, which is inaccessible to the fantasies of our own mind or the brutalities of our own will. Interesting turn of phrase, the brutalities of our own will. This little point of nothingness and of absolute poverty is the pure glory of God in us. It's like a pure diamond, blazing with the invisible light of heaven. It is in everybody. And if we could see it, we would see these billions of points of light coming together in the face and blaze of a sun that would make all the darkness and cruelty of life vanish completely. It's so hard to put language around these kinds of experiences. He and others are obviously gifted at that. But as humans, we seem to have to try to put language around these things. In order to capture this idea of a divine essence at the heart of each person, Merton coined the terms true self and false self. The false self, then, is that whole collection of qualities, behaviors, and feelings, both positive and negative, that we think we are. In other words, most of what I have been describing, what we've been talking about so far this morning. Others have referred to it as the small self. Psychologists might call it the ego. Those concepts kind of overlap. In Merton's view, the spiritual life is not to be found in striving for constant improvement, but rather in recognizing and detaching from the false self so that we can ground our awareness in the true self, the holy self, our divine essence. And he lists the fruits that come from doing that. No more war, no more hatred, no more cruelty, no more greed. So it's not just a personal, private experience. it finds expression in concrete results, benefits in the world. Now, it's important to notice that the false self is not something bad. It's not like a lie. It's not wrong, and it's not something to be ashamed of. We all have one. We all, in fact, it seems to be something that we humans need to have. We need to develop our personality, if you will, as a way of getting on in the world. Our parents teach us, we teach our kids, and so there's much in that is good. When we're born into this life, we early on start to develop this sense of a separate self that's not there when we're born. From our parents and others, we gradually learn who we are, and more importantly, who we should be. If we're lucky, the self that we develop is functional for us and others in the world. Not something to be ashamed of, it's something we need. But everything important in life is a paradox. A paradox is a pair of opposites, both of which are true in some way, but are in tension with each other and can never be fully reconciled. Our logical brains don't like this. We need to develop a strong, healthy ego so that we're not buffeted about too much by all the world throws at us. And then at some point, often in the second half of life, we need to gradually transcend or let go of that separate self in order to discover and increasingly inhabit that holy center, that deeper self, the true self. I think that as very young children, many of us were naturally in touch with that part of ourselves, but lost it over time. So the false or small self is not something to be rejected or expunged or denied. It's not something to be ashamed of. There is much that is valuable in it. But rather, Merton says, that in spiritual maturity, to move closer to God, we need to learn to detach from it. That is, to hold it lightly as a useful tool, because only by detaching can we allow ourselves to sink into that deeper, truer reality, the divine in us. Would the real self please stand up? Not all of us are gifted with such a dramatic spiritual experience as Merton had, though, as I've said, such experiences are not rare. I think most of us who don't get stuck in the early stages of development, most of us learn to detach, at least somewhat, from that self. Old people who have done this have a kind of tranquility about them that you've noticed, I'm sure, and which is very attractive. And those who don't choose the path of growth, who are too rigid or defended, often become bitter, angry, and judgmental. We've all met both kinds. Maybe we've all been both kinds. Mostly letting go happens kind of gradually. It's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and sometimes we let go of a chunk of our false selves all at once by making a decision. And again, by letting go, I don't mean deleting it. I just mean detaching, having a little distance, holding it lightly. A few years ago, I shared from this pulpit an experience I had in my 40s when I was in crisis at work. I was triggered by the perception that my reputation was in the community was suffering. People were talking. And it was not about any wrongdoing, but about my competence. In hindsight, I think it's likely that my fears were overblown, but that's what I thought at the time. To make a long story short, I suddenly was received, had the insight that my reputation was only as important as I let it be, as I decided it was. A good reputation is nice to have, but it's not essential. It's really only what other people think. I had the power to simply think differently. So I made a conscious choice that that was not going to matter to me. I wasn't going to give that any more energy. And as soon as I made that decision, I felt a huge sense of relief and freedom. And I was able to move back into my work with energy and enthusiasm, and I believe greater effectiveness. So I think that's an example of letting go of one chunk of the false self. I didn't think of it that way at the time, of course. And as these things often are, it was motivated by pain. We don't usually let go of things until they're not working for us anymore. It takes a crucifixion before there can be a resurrection. But new life was the result. Another way of detaching is to, and this has been a challenge for me for many years, to intentionally work at living in the present. The divine is always experienced in the present, I believe. Most of us waste a lot of time thinking about things that happened in the past, and with feelings of whatever they are, nostalgia or resentment or anger or wistfulness, or else thinking about the future, planning, worrying, imagining bad things happening. That's me, actually. My brain just goes to the future. Here's an example. Sometimes when I'm out and about, I do something, perhaps an impulsive purchase of something. And I think, oh, my lovely wife Susan is not going to be, she's not going to approve of this. She's Scottish, you know. And I just know what she's going to say when I get home. And I resent it already. I plan what I'm going to say, how I'm going to answer, how I'm going to defend myself, or maybe counterattack a little bit, you know. Who do you think you are, anyway? I wouldn't actually say that. And, you know, how many times I get home and she doesn't say anything at all. You know, I'm almost disappointed because I was so ready. I had all the lines worked out. Has that ever happened to you? I was operating out of my false self. Think of how much time and emotional energy I wasted on that. Oh, I'm getting my wires crossed here. I wasted on that internal drama. I was going to say infernal drama, and that fits too. If I could have gotten my head out of the future and allowed myself to be in the present, the sun on my cheek, the blue sky, or the joy of being in my own body, or any of those things, it would have been a whole different story. Now, most spiritual teachers say that to detach from our false selves, we need some kind of regular spiritual practice. And the traditional ones are meditation, centering prayer, yoga perhaps. For some people, including me, music is a spiritual practice, whether that's singing, playing an instrument, or simply listening. So is attending church. So can walking, as long as I'm trying to be acutely present and aware of what's coming into my senses, not going for my walk and thinking about other things in the future. Anything that moves us into the present moment and causes us to really pay attention, I think makes us more open to those moments. Jesus is always exhorting his followers to be awake. Be awake. And of course, everyday prayer is an important spiritual practice, as is reading the Bible or other sources of spiritual inspiration. There are many paths. Those moments when we experience that deeper reality, that sense of being connected to something bigger and deeper, are moments that Jim Hanna, who many of you remember as our former children and youth minister, talked about as God moments. I think most of us experience these moments now and then. The question is, do we pay attention to them? Do we cultivate them? Do we understand the deep reality that they point to, or do we just write them off as one-offs? They can hit us unexpectedly. Last Sunday, I was standing at my kitchen window looking up the street, and I saw a young dad and his daughter, maybe around, I'm going to say around 6 or 7, walking down the street in my direction. I was struck by the way the little girl moved down the street. She swung her arms and strode with great purpose. She looked like a girl who knew her place in the world. She also looked like she was completely comfortable and secure in her dad's company. How did I know this? Well, I don't, but that's what it looked like. She inhabited her body and was not afraid to take up space in the world. My heart was really warmed by that sight. Both the dad and the daughter, two very different body languages. And I felt a surge of love for these two. Now, I will likely never know who they are. I may never see them again. So in one sense, it's just a passing incident. But in a deeper and more important sense, I believe it was a God moment. A moment in which I felt connection with these two strangers. I saw their beauty. And somehow, that connected with the beauty in me. Lost my place. The part that connects me, the God in me to the God in you, the God in everyone. So nod if you recognize this feeling. Moments like these come and go. We can't stay in those experiences all the time. We have to live in the everyday world too. But if we've had these moments, and if we pay attention, we can take actions that increase the chance that they will happen again. We can be awake. It's a state that can come back, or that we can come back to. Not always on demand, but we can walk around with more openness to be, as the expression goes, gobsmacked. Isn't that a great word? Literally, it means a smack across the mouth, right? But I think the word should be God-smacked. So even if you don't remember ever having had an experience like that, just knowing or believing that this mysterious true self exists, that it's intimately a part of God and intimately a part of you, just believing it can help us take our false self, our small self, less seriously. And that's a good thing. May your real self please stand up. And actually, I mean that literally, because when you've done that, then your holy sacred self can join with other holy sacred selves in this room or wherever you're watching or listening, and we will sing, "Come and Find the Quiet Center," which is good advice for this journey.
For
just before I go on, I want to put in a word of gratitude to Jim Johnson for being willing to come and play for us. And I think you'll be here the next 2 Sundays, right? Right, and we always enjoy that. We recognize and affirm that all of life is a gift, something that we received regardless of deserving, and the proper response to that is gratitude. When we live our lives from a place of gratitude, we cannot help but be generous with our time, our labor, our talents, with our hearts, and with our material resources. All of the gifts you entrust to this congregation are received with gratitude and will be used to support our various ministries and to further the presence of love and justice in our community and the world. Your gifts of money can be made in the box near the back door. If you're already on PAR, pre-authorized remittance, that happens all by itself. And there's other ways on our website. We thank God for all of your gifts and for you. Let's sing, What Can I Do? Won't you join me in prayer? Holy One, our world seems ever more to be on fire. Heat and drought are working together to create hundreds of literal fires, both close to home and far away, filling the air we breathe with smoke and driving people from their homes. If it's not fire, it's flood, tornadoes, or hurricanes. And we know that we have had a hand in creating the conditions for these tragedies. In other places, it's political, cultural, religious, or cultural violence. Here in Canada, we continue to struggle with the reactivated but old trauma of residential schools, stolen lives and stolen cultures, not to mention ongoing racism, which seems to be growing. Our political systems seem more and more polarized and hostile, where listening and respect are absent and personal attacks take the place of reasoned discussion. We are tempted, Holy One, to give in to despair or cynicism, or just throw up our hands. Help us to remember that at the core of each of us, including every person spouting anger and hate, is a sacred core, a beloved true self, however hidden, however buried. Help us to respond as if that were true. Make us instruments of your peace, reconciliation, and healing. And at the same time as we acknowledge the creation groaning, we remind ourselves of our gratitude for so many things today. We are thankful that we might gather in this place and know that we are safe as we explore our faith as one body and deepen our relationship with you and with one another. We are especially thankful for all of those who have touched our lives with patience and love and acceptance, so that we have seen through them a fresh vision of your nature and your love for us. We are grateful for those who confront us lovingly with the things that we need to see and who love us in spite of it all. We too would be such teachers to those who are in our midst. Grant us the gift of openness and hospitality as we share our faith and our truth with those who need us to share those things. Grant that we may live our lives with integrity and with love. Touch the lives of those in need today, whether their needs are for the healing of mind or body or spirit, or the normal everyday requirements of human existence like food and drink and money and shelter, or for the psychological and spiritual things such as understanding and acceptance, patient love to lessen the pain and sorrow of grief, or the hopelessness that comes when dreams shatter. Hear us as we pray out loud or in silence the people and things that are on our hearts just now. Speak to each one of us here. Speak to our own place in this body of Christ, and in the fulfillment of our prayers, that we may be conscious that we are the agents by which your love, your healing, and your spirit reach into the lives of others. Remind us that as part of the body, we are always united in your love and in your grace. Today and for all our tomorrows. Amen. Come touch our hearts. Trust too that the blessing of the Holy One is with you today, will be with you tomorrow, and will remain with you always.
Amen.
Amen.
And the peace of Christ be with you.
And also with you.